Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick here to talk about the joint practice today with the Washington Commanders. Exciting day always to have these joint practices. There'll be one today, of course, that already happened, and one tomorrow. Then a game between the two teams not until next Monday, but a couple of days of highly physical play that I look forward to each year. Anyway, a hot day today. Of course, they're in full pads. We had some notable absences still. Ronnie Stanley remained out. The word from Harbs is he's just protecting his ankle. Now he's missed a couple days. He's basically missed most of the padded practices, if not all of them, this summer. So it'll be interesting to see if he's back tomorrow or they continue to keep him out and really just wait to use him during the regular season. Obviously, very significant player to the Ravens. It would be nice, obviously, to know that he can stand up to the contact. On the other hand, maybe it's just nicer to see if he can do that in week one against the Texans. So we'll see how that plays out. In terms of participation, we got a few things going on and some changes. The PUP is now completely empty with J.K. Dobbins' return on Monday. So the Ravens still have 4 players on NFI with various degrees of when they're going to be back. Mullen is not expected back this season, and he's on a reserve NFI, so they have something to wrangle out probably in terms of an injury settlement before they unload him. Voorhees expected to be on NFI the entire year. He's the guy with 38 bench reps, great prospect for the offensive line, and probably to play right guard next year. Tyus Bowser still on NFI. We heard some good news yesterday from Harbaugh about Bowser and the likelihood that he'd be back for the opener. So that's something to look forward to. And Nick Moore, the long snapper, of course, lost for the season. They have Tyler Ott, now a former Pro Bowler with the Seahawks, who's in and doing the long snapping. So the NFI list is bad, but at least the news on Bowser is good because that's Sam linebacker spot, one of the really big weaknesses for the Baltimore Ravens going into this year. A few players missed practice today. I did not see Isaiah Likely out there, Jalen Armour-Davis, Pepe Williams, Rock Yassin, Arthur Mollett, and Jaquan Amos. So 5 defensive backs missed practice, 4 of them corners. Ravens pretty damn shorthanded in this practice at cornerback, but it meant some more reps for some players who now have a chance. So we'll get to that a little bit later. 2 new Ravens in camp, both defensive backs. DeAndre Houston Carson, a safety wearing number 45, and Tay Hayes, a cornerback wearing number 18. Both were on the field, both made some plays, and it was fun to see a couple of new guys and what they could do. So Houston Carson in particular looks like a hitter, and we're gonna probably enjoy seeing him play in that next preseason game. It's an extremely physical and particularly chippy practice today. They're on 2 fields, and I got to tell you, trying to cover practices like that, I've just given up on the component of trying to watch 2 fields at once. It's too much. So what you're going to get from me is a review of what the defense did today. I stayed on the defensive field. I tried to stay hawking that field, not trying to look over to the offensive field and see what happens. There was fireworks on that field. There's lots to see. There's also a streaming component to this practice that looks like it's hosted by Garrett Downing on the Ravens website. That'll be something that you can watch if you really want to see Zay Flowers, or you want to see how the wide receivers are doing. So hopefully this is the complement to that. This is the defensive side of the ball, and I'll give you all the information I've got on that. I watched all defenses, as I said. Special teams drills is what they started with. They had some punting they were doing. They actually were kicking the ball today, which is unusual. Stout had a couple of really booming punts today. They weren't just purely directional. Of the coverage guys, Dante Demas stood out for beating 2 gunners on consecutive reps. That's really good. Dante Demas, one of the things, being a gunner, might help him get a practice squad elevation at some point during the season. I think he's almost certainly headed for the practice squad. He'll be a guy who can be a special teams asset when they need him. One thing that has not looked good so far is his blocking. On offense, he really needs to do more of that. And so, it'll be in a year of opportunity, hopefully, for him to grow as a blocker, grow as a receiver, also play some good special teams. And hey, that could be a really good niche for him in the NFL. And obviously, practice squad activations are a little bit more money, so that's nice, and a good opportunity for him. I thought that besides Demas, that Harrison covered one punt very well. He was down there, ran right through a double team. By the way, they were doing a lot of 2x2 stacking on these gunners. So basically, they were making it difficult for the gunners to break through downfield in each case, which I thought was good. And obviously, they're not trying to block punts, but they're just trying to make it as difficult as possible for gunners and really test them out. So good way to do the drill, and I enjoyed it. Enjoyed watching that part. Lots of action in 11 on 11. I'm going to kind of run through a lot of what I've seen here for starters. Actually, let's just talk about the defense in general here. The first string cornerbacks today were Stevens, Humphrey, and Ardarius Washington at slot corner. Now that slot corner job has been passed around like a cold so far, but I think that Washington is probably now likely to keep it into the regular season, if I really had to guess right now. So talk about its evolution a little bit. Brandon Stevens started camp there at slot corner as the starter. Okay. Didn't make a lot of sense to me based on physical skills, but that's who it was. Then Arthur Mollett had a shot at it. And I'm forgetting somebody else because there was somebody else who had a shot at it as well. And that's Pepe Williams, of course, who got hurt. Now, appears to be out for a couple of months, probably. Harbaugh talked about October would be the earliest he'd be back. But that really leaves Ardarius Washington as the man. Unless they're going to do something like move Kyle Hamilton back to the slot, I think Ardarius Washington has a good chance. The other thing about Stevens is that he's very clearly near the top of their cornerback depth chart. And how do we know that? Well, he was one of the starting three corners today with Stevens and Humphrey and Washington, of course. But the point I'm making is that Rock Ya-Sin is out. So I think the lowest that Stevens could be on the depth totem pole would be third among their current cornerbacks. Obviously, if we talked about this in the offseason, that's not an ideal situation to have Brandon Stevens be your number three cornerback. But it is what it is. And I think this is an opportunity for him to step forward and try and do some things well. He looked good in that first preseason game, I thought. Made a good coverage in the back of the end zone. They only threw, I think, 3 completes on 8 targets to his receivers in the game, which is a nice positive. So good game for him in the first thing. He gets another chance. Washington also a good game, made the big play on the 2-point conversion for the interception. That's not technically an interception, I know, on that 2-point try, but looked very good. I thought he also had got in there for a near sack. That's a pressure that actually flushed the pocket into a sack 0 as well. So Washington had his good plays against the Eagles as well. And I think both those guys are probably going to get a shot in the opener, assuming Rock Ya-Sin is not back. Arthur Mollett is the only other guy that might be in the competition at slot corner, and he's been out now for quite a while. So my guess is he probably ends up getting cut based on where he is right now. I just don't think the Ravens know enough about him to go any further than that. And that would leave Washington as the primary slot corner. And I don't even know where they would go next. They might move Humphrey inside. The team is just extremely shorthanded. And like I said, they got a couple of new guys today. They've had one guy in particular who showed up at safety in Jeremy Lucien, who I think is more suited to that role based on speed and instincts than he is going to slot corner. But he has also played a little bit of slot corner as well. But he's a larger guy. He's about 6'2", and runs a 4.7 40. So you think about somebody like that, you're probably thinking about a safety and not a corner. But corner is where he played in college. So, not 100% sure where he might end up. Probably is not going to make the team. So he'd be a practice squad elevation guy more than likely. And maybe between the combination of Ardarius Washington and what a practice squad elevation, whether Lucien or Mayfield or somebody else might be the guy, would give you enough to get through until you get a second slot corner healthy. And it's still very possible the Ravens are going to go out to the market and find somebody, I think. So Ravens have some options, but some guys who would not otherwise get chances are getting chances right now, and it's pretty cool to see some of them coming through. We'll talk a little bit about that. Other starters, everybody exactly as you'd expect: Marcus Williams and Hamilton, Smith and Queen, Ajabo and Owe, and Pierce and Matabike. David Ajabo, big day today, by the way. Couple sacks, really look good as a pass rusher. That's something very nice to see. And I've talked this offseason about being very bullish about Owe's season coming up, and I think he will. I think he's going to be quite good, and he'll, particularly if he can stay on that weak side, on the rush side, where he faces a naked tackle. And I've talked a little bit about that in terms of being able to beat a tackle with his athleticism, causing that tackle to overreact. But Owe is a guy that had a big day today. On the defensive line, Pierce and Matabike were the starters, and Pierce had a huge day. 2 sacks, twice in the backfield, plays blown dead. He looked terrific. And we just finished a game where Travis Jones looked like the best player on the field by far. Nobody on the Eagles could block him. And you've got Michael Pierce now looking like an interior pass rusher. It's looking more and more like the Ravens are going to be less reliant on kicking a guy inside, whether that might be Tavius Robinson or somebody else, but in the old style fashion that they have for all of the Martindale era and the first year when they had players of the McDonald era, which is kicking an outside linebacker inside to play essentially a 3-tech role and rush the passer from there. But they have guys, with Jones and the difficulties he poses for the opponent in terms of allowing him a one-on-one matchup, and Pierce and how dominant he's been in terms of compressing the pocket by bull rush and beating people. Just really exciting to think about what the interior pass rush for the Ravens could look like this year. It could be driven from the inside. Campbell has done some of that, but the last guy who really dominated from inside was Pernell McPhee, in terms of a guy who would set up the entire pass rush by his interior ability to beat double teams even. So I'm very excited about the prospects for that. Talk about a little bit about the pass rush drills. I was watching a couple of different groups, so I'm back and forth and watching running backs and linebackers, and also outside linebackers, edge rushers generally, and tackles. I saw Harrison beat running back Derek Gore. Roquan beat running back Chris Rodriguez. Kaim Caesar was having a tough time getting stonewalled both in individual drills and in a stunt drill they do. So it's interesting they do a stunt drill. One of the things about stunts is they're very effective when you don't know they're coming. And then you need to get between these two guys, get some shoulders turned. Then you have the peel to worry about. If everybody knows the stunt is coming, they're obviously not going to be as effective. And the Ravens had a tough time getting anything going with their stunts against the Commanders' interior IOLs. Jeremiah Moon was pancaked on one. Kaim Caesar hit the ground on another. He was stonewalled on a second rep of that. And Batts and Harrison were also stonewalled on a rep. So again, I don't put a lot of stock in that, seeing that in a practice like that where everybody knows the stunt's coming. You kind of got to have some trickery going on there, and it's got to be trickery 2 ways. One is they got to know the stunt's not coming, and 2 is they have to not know who the looper is or whether it's somebody coming by blitz or whatnot. So it's just not an easy pickup for that offensive lineman or an easy switch for them to make. So anyway, it was what it was. It was kind of fun to watch, but the Ravens obviously weren't getting it done in that. Moving on to 11 on 11. One of the disappointing things today was the Commanders' ability to open up big holes on run plays. Now, you've heard me complain about this before, in that run plays during camp tend to be crap when there's no tackling involved. You just can't tell a lot about what's going on. Occasionally, you get a big enough hole that there's burst and whatnot. This is kind of the worst of both worlds in this thing, because they were physical and they weren't supposed to, I don't think, really tackle all the way, but they're definitely, those running backs are trying to make contact. Those defenders are trying to knock them down. stop them if they're in a group. But this is definitely much more physical than normal practice. And the Commanders' offensive line opened some big some big holes against the Ravens' defensive line, and that was unfortunate. And they had some pretty effective looking runs. And then when they were out in level 2, the Commanders finished their runs. And in particular, there's a play near the end of practice where Antonio Gibson ran left and he knocked down Marcus Williams. It was a violent collision. And Williams really took the worst of it. And that got some oohs and ahs from the crowd. But they had other good runs several times during practice that it looks like something that they'll spend a little bit of time on with the tape, if I had to guess. Was what it was. All right, the new guy, DeAndre Houston Carson, who wears number 45, had a pass defense 10 yards near the left sideline. I did not get all of the numbers on these Commanders players, and this was a case where I didn't pick up who he had the PD in front of. But nice play by him. And obviously making his presence felt as a newer guy here. Then Jeremy Lucien had the first of 2 passes defense in coverage. This first one was of Brandon Dillon. It was 10 yards by the right sideline. He was there and knocked the ball down. Lucien played some safety in the first game, had a pretty nice set of plays, a pass defense, a nice run fit. Take a look at my notes from that game, and you'll see he's mentioned fairly well. He got a +1 in terms of my expectation change for him. He's a guy I would not have expected to make the practice squad. Now I think he's got a very good shot at the practice squad, and it looks to me like again moving from corner to safety might be the move for him. Corey Mayfield had a pass defense versus wide receiver Zion Bowens, and that was 25 yards. On the left sideline. Again, those are higher leverage plays. Obviously, you want to see a stickiness in terms of that coverage down the field, and he did a good job on that play. Mentioned Michael Pierce being in the backfield twice on sacks. I don't need to do that. Terry McLaurin beat Ardarius Washington on a slant. 10 yards between the numbers in the left hash. It was not a terrible play to get beat on, and you're getting beat by a very good player, obviously, so it's not the kind of thing that should upset you. On the next play, Ardarius Washington did something that I'm not really too happy about. He put a huge hit on Cole Turner, who, first of all, is a tight end. So Ardarius Washington's got a little bit of a Corey Ivy-sized chip on his shoulder from being a smaller guy, and he really probably wanted to put a hit on Turner rather than Turner lay his shoulder into him and look bad. But Turner actually dropped the ball 5 yards from the line of scrimmage, roughly between 0 and 5, probably near the left sideline. And Washington finished him in terms of sending him to the ground out of bounds very hard. And that precipitated a 2-team huddle, whereas Marlon Humphrey later stated they were probably discussing the weather. But there was some pushing and shoving, and it took a little while for them to separate that group. They was mentioned at the podium, Harbaugh, that both he and Rivera had to talk to his guys separately about reducing the chippiness level, reducing some of the cheap shots that were occurring in this, but also just reducing the overall physicality level. You'd like to see it. It's the only chance for physicality for some of these players. And then on the other hand, then it gets out of hand and too much is too much. Jahan Dotson caught a 15-yard pass near the left sideline in front of Brandon Stevens. Stevens gave up a couple plays in this practice, but I don't think he looked terrible or anything. Houston Carson delivered a thundering hit on De'Ami Brown. They have a pretty deep set of receivers in Washington, quite a deep quality set of guys. De'Ami Brown was bobbling the football, and Houston Carson absolutely completed that pass defense by blowing him up very hard. Corey Mayfield, another pass defense, his second of the day. There's 5 yards, 5 circle, but a flag was thrown on that one, so that may have been taken away. You often see a flag on the field, and then they don't really give you information about who's it's on. If it's a pre-snap penalty, I know that's on the offense, so it's a false start or it's a delay of game. No problem. I'll just report that probably as a false start most of the time. But when it's in the secondary, I don't know if it's an offensive or defensive foul. And it would be nice if the officials took a moment to just kind of declare who it was on, and it's very hard to find that official. They obviously don't pitch it over to a referee to announce the call, so you got to be right on the official who threw the flag at the time, and if you see it, great, and if you don't, then you kind of miss out on what sort of a flag it should have been. But my guess is that one was on Mayfield. Kaim Caesar, in a day where there were not a lot of good run stops, had a really nice run stop of his own. And that was nice to see after he's had some difficulty in terms of his pass rush. So Caesar is a guy who played a lot of the second half in the first game against the Eagles. He probably makes this team on the practice squad. I would guess because of his size, he's more of a plug-and-play nose tackle at 320 pounds roughly, who is the one guy they have not named Jones or Pierce, who might be able to fill that backup nose role. Now nose tackles are not that rare a body type that it's hard to find. But ones who have a little bit of athleticism, it becomes more difficult. But there's always a Jelly Ellis out there on the wire somewhere, on the street somewhere where you can pick him up. So it's a good position to have if you want a little bit of depth, if you want to balance your depth across your various positions on the practice squad. I think that's probably where he ends up. Then Lucien had his second PD of the day. He undercut the wide receiver Casimir Allen for a pass defense. Again, 10 yards by the right sideline. Really nice play there, and good to see him. Instincts look good, hands the football quickly, and seems to find the ball in the air well. Malik Ham had a sack that was blown dead a little bit late, but I believe it was blown dead. And nice to see him continue with some pass rush chops. He showed up in the game against the Eagles fairly prominently in my notes. Take a look there, but it would have been great to see him drop to coverage some. And let me sidebar here a little bit. When they do 7-on-7 drills, they do two types. So they do from a nickel look and from a base look. So when they do it from a nickel look, they have 2 inside linebackers, they have 3 corners, and they have 2 safeties, or make up the 7 players. When they do it from a base look, they don't have the slot corner, and they instead have an outside linebacker they typically use, okay, with the inside linebacker. And then that outside linebacker may have coverage responsibility on a tight end, short zone, whatever it might be. I did not notice Ham out there, but that would have been the perfect kind of a place to get him some trial there. Why is that important? Well, because the Ravens are still short a Sam linebacker, and they need to either find one, maybe on the street. Kyle Van Noy is still available, or they need to develop one. And I hope that does not mean one of their top pass rushers, which means Malik Ham is probably the ideal candidate to take that role. So I'm very much hoping that we see him in some base looks have coverage responsibility, or even in some nickel looks have coverage responsibility where he drops and somebody else rushes the passer. I think I'm comfortable enough with what Malik Ham can do as a pass rusher. It might not be enough, but I'm comfortable enough that he can rush the passer somewhat effectively. What I'm not comfortable with is knowing that he can drop to coverage and provide the Ravens the pass rush flexibility they need from having.
Film Study is brought to you by Factor. With the busy fall season just around the corner, you might be looking for wholesome, convenient meals for those jam-packed days. Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit, can help you fuel up fast with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. You'll save time, eat well, and stay on track with your healthy lifestyle. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are ready in just 2 minutes, so all you have to do is heat and enjoy. Then get back to crushing your goals. Refresh your healthy habits without missing a beat. And with Factor, you can rest assured you're making a sustainable choice. We offset 100% of our delivery emissions, source 100% renewable electricity for our production sites and offices, and feature sustainably sourced seafood in all of our meals. This August, get Factor and enjoy eating well without the hassle. Simply choose your meals and enjoy fresh, flavor-packed meals delivered to your door and ready in just 2 minutes. No prep, no mess. Head to factormeals.com/Ravens50 and use code Ravens50 to get that 50% off. That's code Ravens50 at factormeals.com/Ravens50 to get 50% off. Film Study is brought to you by GoPuff. GoPuff is a delivery app that offers super fast delivery of anything you need. Their simple-to-use app lets you order your favorite brands and products right to your door in 30 minutes or less. No middleman, no crazy fees, and no waiting around. GoPuff has literally everything you could ever want. Get snacks, drinks, groceries, alcohol, home essentials, and more delivered with a click of a button. For a limited time only, GoPuff is giving new customers $10 off their first 10 orders, plus a free 14-day trial of their exclusive membership program by using the code WELCOME1010. GoPuff's membership program gets you access to unlimited free deliveries with no service fees, extremely low pricing on over 150 everyday essentials like eggs, milk, Ben & Jerry's, and more, and insane weekly deals on the most coveted and in-demand brands and products. So download the GoPuff app or visit gopuff.com and use the code WELCOME1010 today.
A outside linebacker that can drop, which allows a safety inside linebacker or the slot corner to blitz. So good opportunity for him, hopefully, and it would be nice. And these joint practices are kind of an ideal time for him to get some opportunities there. See, I mentioned Antonio Gibson knocking down Marcus Williams. The 11-on-11 session, there were several of them, but the last of them ended with Phillips finishing with a pair of good plays. So he's on incredible training camp heater right now, doing everything right. Wonderful preseason game. Certainly looks like he's improved his chance to make the team a lot. There aren't too many guys that are right on that very thin roster bubble that might be on and might be off, but Phillips is one of them. And he had a sack that did not seem to get blown dead, but it was a sack, no doubt about it. The quarterback started to scramble out to the left, and they took about an extra 2 seconds before they blew the play dead, but it was his sack. So a good play there. He also had good containment of the QB on a run right. So the play had kind of broken down, and he was probably not spying the QB, might have a coverage responsibility in a short zone, though, and he contained the QB well on that play on a run right, and the play was blown dead before contact, obviously, because the QB is wearing the special jersey and doesn't get hit in these practices. But those were nice 11-on-11 plays. I'm going to take a drink here. We can move on to 7-on-7. Okay, so one of the really nice things, this was early on the 7-on-7 drill, is the Ravens delivered a rare coverage sack with the play blown dead at 7-7. Nobody rushes the passer on these. So they wait about 5 seconds. If the quarterback doesn't get rid of the ball, then they blow the play dead on a coverage sack. And they did that. And that's a real credit to the guys who are doing the job here. 7-on-7, it's pretty damn easy to find open receivers or find one-on-one receivers where there's a high probability of a catch. And to get a sack in that situation is very nice. Washington in this 7-on-7 section, and I combined all the 7-on-7 play and the 11-on-11 play. So I couldn't actually tell you if this was before or after his big hit on Cole Turner, but he held up delivering a big hit on running back Antonio Gibson. And he really could have delivered a pounding on him, but he didn't do it. And, he either got a talking to for not being physical enough on that play, and then he delivered the hit on Cole Turner, or he got a talking to for delivering too big a hit on Cole Turner, and he let up on Antonio Gibson. But either way, Washington certainly was in position to make a big hit there, and that's what's really important. Jeremiah Moon drove wide receiver Dax Milne out of bounds with a very hard hit. Just drove him into the ground and out of bounds. And, it's one thing, and these were inbounds hits. So I'm not saying they were completely dirty. They're just overly physical for a practice like this, I would say. This one didn't precipitate a fight, but or a huddle of players from both teams. But it was a hard hit. Cole Turner beat Kayvon Seymour crossing 10 yards between the numbers in the left hash. Seymour is a player who got the starting job in the last preseason game, along with Stevens. It wouldn't have been shocking for him to be starting maybe ahead of Stevens in this game, but he's clearly now behind him on the depth chart. So, an interesting point there. And Seymour, I think he's played quite well. I think he's got a good chance to make the team. They love him for his special teams. And if he can be your fifth corner, that's probably great. You're okay with it. If he's your third or fourth corner, I think you're in a lot of trouble. So he's not the guy you want there, but could make a really good living for himself as a perpetual Raven, giving his special teams prowess if he can play that fifth corner role adequately. And he's played a little bit all over for the Ravens in that role. He's played a little bit of slot and a little bit on the outside, so that versatility doesn't hurt him at all. I don't know if he's actually played safety yet, but I have the feeling he probably could. So he'd be one of these, I'll play wherever you need me guys, and combined with special teams, that always wins you a lot of hardball points. Let's see. The next thing, Harrison. He was beaten by running back Alex Arma. He tried to punch the ball out after the play. Arma had a good firm grab on about a 10-yard play between the numbers and the left hash. Wide receiver Jalen Sample caught a 5-yard pass and absorbed a couple of very big hits. Mayfield and then Tay Hayes getting into the play there. Each had a big hit on him, and good to see a little bit from Tay Hayes in this practice. He wasn't out there all that many snaps, but he did some hitting when he was, and that's good to see. Jeremiah Moon came back with a pass to fenced 5 yards, 3 circle. I usually mention Ham because I like what I've seen from as a pass rusher, but Jeremiah Moon also might end up being the backup Sam on this team. And it'd be interesting to see how this plays out. The Ravens really do need somebody, even if Bowser is able to play at the start of the year. I think they're going to want to try and limit Bowser's snaps. They have a couple ways they can do it. They can go to a 2-down usage of, say, Malik Harrison on the edge, so using more as an edge setter than as a true Sam, where he brings you a lot of pass rush flexibility. But they could go out to the street and get a JPP or somebody like that who gives you good run defense on the first 2 downs, gives you a little bit of pass rush, knows how to get his hands in the air, can do some other things for you, but then you're really not getting much in the way of coverage ability with an older player like JPP in a spot like that. They really, to my mind, they need to go out and get somebody who really has a background in pass coverage. Van Noy is kind of like the perfect guy. Vince Beagle was a good cheap option last year, but he got hurt. So there's guys around the league who fit this characteristic, but you don't always know who they are, particularly coming out of college. I know I've talked about that a fair amount before, because those guys in college, if they can rush the passer at all, that's what they do. They don't drop the coverage. They tend to be the best pass rushers on their team in college, and so they're used for that primarily. Anyway, getting back to 7-on-7, wide receiver Samuel Curtis made a really nice low grab despite good coverage by Kyle Hamilton. Didn't see a lot of Hamilton today, but he was there on this play, and he was in extremely good position. This is a case of there's no defense for the perfect pass, and it was in there for about a 15-yard grab near the left sideline. Caillou Kelly. Now, he had a good game against the Eagles, looking for more this week in terms of a step forward, something that would put him on the totem clearly of the where he fits in at corner. Looks like he's pretty firmly affixed in that second team right now, but he was beaten deep by Cole Turner for a 25-yard play down the left sideline. It looked like it might have been zone coverage because Cole Turner was about 5-6 yards behind him and also about another 7 or 8 yards in front of the safety. I did not have my head up to really look. Did Caillou let him get away, or did Cole Turner just find a softer spot in the zone? Given the fact that Cole Turner is a tight end, I may have been giving Kelly too much of the fault for this situation. But either way, that zone needs to close up. You've heard me say a lot before. All zone coverages that you start with eventually become man coverages in some way once you find your assignment. And it's a case where somebody needed to be on him on a play that went, a pass that went that far. Got another play where Houston Carson and Phillips absolutely bullied a receiver to the ground, could not see the commander's number. Kind of a zoo out there today, both in terms of the fans, more in terms of a tremendously large media contingent present. So, even though they're split into two fields and presumably the media is split, and then I was on the defensive field, which is the less popular, you still have a lot of people watching it. And a lot of the guys that I'm kind of competing for space with are Washington media guys who want to watch the Washington offense. And so because I want to watch the Baltimore defense, obviously that's, I'm on the same field as they are. So anyway, Houston Carson and Phillips, and a really nice hit to bully down a receiver there. Swan was beat deep on a play by Jalen Sample. Difficult first game for Swan in the preseason. Didn't do anything terrific to look better in this practice. I hope there's still time. Hopefully get some reps coming in. But Swan was one of the guys who entered early in the game against the Eagles, and I would expect that to change. I think they've got, might give Mayfield a chance to come in early, might give Caillou Kelly a chance to come in earlier than he did, and maybe get a look at Swan later on in the practice. So if I had to guess, one of those two probably gets a chance to show up a little earlier against the Commanders in the game on Monday night. Let's see. What else have I not talked about? Let's talk about the interviews. What I always encourage you to do, I'm going to try and tell you a little bit about what I think I'm hearing, what I read between the lines, but I do encourage you just go out and listen to the interviews. They don't take that long to listen to. You can fast forward through some of it if you already think you know the answer, or if the questions seem to be or answers seem to be obvious coach speak. But Harbaugh talked a little bit about the dust-ups during practice. He made the point that joint practices give you more control of physicality in a game, but then because you also want that physicality, it becomes a question of how much is too much. And they had a couple occurrences today, obviously, where they had some dust-ups over this. The groups of players were getting together over it, and things are there to be. Things had to be said. The most interesting thing he said was this next point, that Patrick Ricard has asked him to move back to working solely as a fullback / tight end, I should say. So it appears the experiment is over in terms of Ricard, being a guard, being the 8th offensive lineman on game day, which would have been a really cool roster gain from that. But that's apparently not going to happen. So the offensive lineman can actually breathe a sigh of relief that one more gets activated on game day. But looking at the possibility of he's being cut, I've heard that proposed on Twitter. There is a $1.75 million savings if he's cut this year, and that's not nothing. But they have to replace him with another player, and that other player is going to make maybe $1 million. I don't think you replace Patrick Ricard coming off a year like he just had, unless you have serious concerns about his health. I don't think you replace him with a $1 million vet min guy or a $750,000 rookie or whatever it is. I just don't think you make that exchange. I think you spend the $1 million, you keep Ricard, you appreciate what he can do for you in games you're leading in terms of helping you put away games. We haven't really seen the offense perform well in the fourth quarter. The offense certainly against the Eagles really could have used Ricard in that first game to avoid some of the problems they had letting the Eagles get back in the game. But anyway, I don't think that they'll cut Ricard this year. Now, next year is a different story. In 2024, there's a $4 million savings for cutting Ricard. It was interesting that Harbaugh said, maybe this is something we try again next season, or words that were maybe slightly different. I might be paraphrasing, but it's interesting that he would potentially defer that discussion about Patrick Ricard. I do think if he really wants to do it, he probably needs to learn the position in the offseason. Probably needs to go to an offensive line camp, learn all the hand placement stuff and whatnot that would put him in a position to actually do it on an emergency basis, actually play reps there in the preseason. If the positional specification needs to be sold to anybody at the league level by saying, look, we just didn't say our fullback as a guard because we wanted an 8th offensive lineman. He actually went to camp. He did this. He's taken all our reps as the 3rd team left guard. He, is a guy we really like in terms of, not letting us down completely in a game where we have an emergency situation. And, he play other positions for us too. Sure, he might play a little defensive line. He may play a little fullback. Who knows what might happen? If you're really going to try and sell that to a decision maker, if in fact there is one, then I think it'd be better if there were an off season of training to be able to point to say, hey, Patrick Ricard really is trying to make it as a guard here now. And that would be something I think it might be worth trying. He was asked about Harbaugh about having a timetable for the left guard decision. He says he would be okay if it went right up to the opener because it probably means both are playing well. Now, I think they'll actually announce it earlier than that. And I think based on the first game, Simpson is got a very significant lead. A lot of the people who thought, well, Saleh, because he had it in OTAs and he started camp as the number 1, and you can include me in that group, may have been taken a little bit by the notion that there was not going to be a switch. Then when Harbaugh announced the switch, kind of light went on for me that you want to be second in terms of your chance to perform at left guard if you're in a 2-man race. And I've heard of some companies, I think I mentioned this before, but I'll do it one more time. One company had a 6-year plan with 3 people they didn't want to lose to give them each a 2-year opportunity to be CEO. Well, if you're the 3rd guy in that arrangement, it might be the best place to be because you get to undo and fix bad decisions made by your 2 predecessors and then have them be your own at the time the decision then has to be made on who's going to be the permanent president of the company. Same thing's happening at left guard here. That, Simpson has come in, first of all, didn't have a penalty, a couple good releases of potential outside the frame holds, which have been his bugaboo throughout his pro career. And then on the other side, Saleh has a face mask penalty. Irony persists throughout our lives here, but this is one of these cases where it was a fairly ironic turn of events that Simpson's helped out by somebody else's penalty. And I think he's got a pretty big lead right now. And that doesn't mean they don't like Saleh. It doesn't mean they don't want to keep Saleh on the roster. His roster spot's in no jeopardy. It's just a matter of who plays that position this year. And I think there's an advantage to having Simpson there and giving Saleh some development time. There also would be an advantage in having Saleh there to develop in the position and potentially allow Simpson to be a backup left tackle if that's something that he could do. Again, has the length to do it, but we'll see if that ends up being the way it plays out. Lamar Jackson was second to the podium. I'll point to the screaming kids again. They have got to do something to change the sound dynamics of that area of the corner of the castle where they do the interviews, because it's very difficult to hear. Players can't hear reporter questions, and reporters can't hear the players at all. So you have to come home and kind of get a sense of the question, and then you kind of listen to the interviews again. But he talked about his working with Todd Monken. There was a comment that he'd given some plays to Todd, and Todd had incorporated them into the playbook. That's great to hear. I hope it's true. I really hope that Monken wants to work on that relationship to try and make Jackson happy. And I'm sure there are things that Jackson can tell Monken in terms of, hey, could we attack that? Could we attack this? And maybe it's collaborative in that Jackson says, he doesn't look like that safety doesn't look like he knows what he's doing. And Monken says, hey, you know what? That's great. Let's design a play, the two of us, to figure out how we attack that. So we'll peel him with Flowers, and we'll get a tight end crossing there. Maybe we even clear it out, and then we get another player in there. That kind of collaboration, I love the idea of. But when I hear something said like that, like I'm giving him plays, it reminds me of a specific scene in the movie Boogie Nights. Okay. Now, in that scene, people may or may not remember about this, but it's Mark Wahlberg movie where he's in the porn industry, and he's a particularly well-known male porn actor. And Burt Reynolds is the director of all these films. and they're both hilarious in their roles. But Burt Reynolds is even more funny, being a sleazy old director of porn films, and he and Wahlberg are doing an interview on Wahlberg's success as a porn star, effectively, and Wahlberg is talking. He goes, "Yeah, he lets me block my own sex scenes sometimes." Immediately, Burt Reynolds responds, "No, you don't. No, I don't let him do that." and so when I hear this about Jackson saying, "I'm giving him plays to put in the playbook," and he's doing it kind of thing, I kind of remember that. Is it fair? No, probably not. But it was funny to me at the time, and so I thought I'd repeat it here. Long story for a limited payoff, I know, but funny movie. If you haven't seen it, go back and watch Boogie Nights. It's pretty funny. Marlon Humphrey was up next to the podium. He talked about the joint practices. One question he got I thought was very good, and that is, do you value this kind of physicality when you're a player who doesn't really get to play at all during the preseason? And Humphrey will barely see the field. He might have a series or two, but these 2 days of practice are the physical practice he gets. And if you had to rate these, the non-padded practices are about a 1 physicality on the 1 to 10 scale. The padded practice physicality is maybe at a 7, and these practices are 8.5 or a 9. With joint practices, you really want to show up against these opponents. You can be less careful because they're not your guys. I think Humphrey even said that, which was pretty good. And then the games themselves are a 10. But if you're a player like Humphrey, this is some of the best physicality you get, and he spoke to that briefly. But I'll let you listen to what his response was exactly. It was basically a yes, that he appreciated the value of that. He talked about the relationship between coverage and pass rush a little bit. And they had that nice 7-on-7 coverage sack that I mentioned earlier. They did some good things with that, but the pass rush getting home, and the question actually was about Adafe Owe's big day, and that he had a couple sacks, and how that helped him. And Marlon did a very good job. He's become he probably always was, but he's an outstanding speaker. And does a very good job of explaining things, I think. And he talked about the interaction between pass rush and coverage, and did a very good job with that. Mark Andrews, last at the podium, spoke glowingly of Odell Beckham as both a player and a teammate. Says between the lines, he's a pro. He does everything right, and off the field, great guy to have in the clubhouse. And so, good to hear all that. They've spent obviously a lot of money getting of next year's money to get Odell Beckham here, and hopefully he provides some value in both places, with Bateman back, and obviously with Flowers being a guy who can always benefit from throwing an additional juke on the opponent at the top of the stem. Having Beckham here as a mentor, tremendously valuable, and hopefully he can also provide something on field as well. Andrews also said going against a different set of players is a nice thing. That he goes up against the same guys day after day in camp, but just going against some different body types and some different players is a positive there. So that was nice to hear. Anyway, great day of practice. If you want to find out what happened on offense, I'd encourage you to look at the streaming element of that. There's seemed to be mostly focused on offense from what I could tell, and I think there'd be a lot of things that Downing has to say that are very interesting about that. And appreciate you joining me here. Folks out there who'd like to do a film study short, there is still time. Hit me up with a DM on Twitter. I'd love to hear from you. I'll get back to you very quick if you want to do an episode on some topic. Theoretical topics, thought experiments, new statistics, whatever it might be. I'm very interested in hearing from you. I'll talk to you next time on Film Study.